Welcome to the Spent the Rent podcast. I am your host, Patty Rose. My guest today talking about the youth vote is Dakota Licea. Did I get that right?
Licea.
Licea.
Yeah, it's Licea.
Oh, man, I had it right. I called you so that I would get it right. I'm so bad with names. Well, anyways, Dakota, we'll just go with that. It's really awesome to have you on. This is funny how this came to be. I'm going to give a little backstory, and then we'll get into how this came to be. So I had posted something, and I think we have a mutual friend because we were not friends on Facebook, but you had commented on a meme that I had shared, and we're pretty riled up. I'm going to go ahead and read the meme, and then we'll talk about the context. So the meme I shared, it says, Joe Biden is chemo. Chemo sucks and sort of tries to kill you, but you take it because it kills your cancer faster. The current state of affairs with regards to how the country is being ran, cancer. Bernie Sanders would have been a surgery that cuts the tumor out without long-term damage, but from the looks of it, we're at a point where that's not a viable option. Not voting is essential oils. It smells nice and does nothing. And you can tell us a little bit about your response to that.
Oh yeah, totally. I actually think that the reason why we had like a mutual friend was because we're both in Eugene, and
Sure.
I used to be in the band at U of O. So like I think we had some random mutual friend.
Jacob Evans, I know, shared it.
Yeah, and like I definitely I was wholeheartedly thinking about how I thought immediately, I was like, oh, Bernie's not a viable option. And I was like, he's completely viable. It just the whole situation that is going on with the discrepancies in the DNC primaries and everything is really just, it sucks because there is a lot of active voter suppression, which kind of like sucks in terms of having our democracy work for the youth, especially when it sucks. Like it's in the middle of a pandemic. That's
oh my god.
It's a completely new territory. So this is everyone's kind of shell shocked because if it was a repeat of 2016 like before, it would have like not gone the same way. But now we got a pandemic on our hands. But I responded basically just like, I believe that Joe Biden is essential oils because if you look at his track record, and he has been in politics for at least he's past over 40 years. Like he has been in there since 1970s. Like he has a long track record of consistently letting the people down and being two-faced. And there are many journalists and many professors who have even testified in court against him, saying that he just seems to make up his own truth. And so I think that the statement that he's chemotherapy and that he's going to kill the cancer would be correct if the statement was that he was going to be killing the cancer. But with all of his policies and everything, it seems like he is just going to be more cancer.
Right. And I mean, it's funny because I was like, oh man, I kind of related to, my reaction to you was not that Bernie isn't a reasonable candidate. I mean, I have ad nauseum talked about how much I support his candidacy. But at this point, with the pandemic, with what we learned in 2016, that your protest vote can be done in the primary, the general, you kind of have to hold your nose and vote for the one that's closer to your viewpoint. And I'm kind of convinced that's probably what I'm going to do. But one thing that I've learned that I've done wrong and people have done wrong to me is that they refuse to listen. That they're just like, nope, you're wrong. I disagree. And so squash what you have to say and do what I want. And that is not ever going to be effective, because what we need to do, we need to find a way to get to a point to where we can feel good about the choices that we're making, the vote that we cast. Now, it's very important that we point out that in Oregon, I mean, it's almost certain that the winner will be announced before our vote is even counted.
Yeah, so it's kind of mute.
We're losing sleep over nothing. And I'm going to get to that in a little bit about what I do think is important and some solutions that we can actually come to locally. Local politics is everything, even Congress, the local representation, that's really important. So do you really truly believe, though, that Biden is the same as Trump? I mean, then it wouldn't be any better.
So I personally do believe that Biden is worse than Trump. And I have a lot of things in front of me, but just off the top of my head, a lot of the things that Trump has gone after are things that the general population has at least had some instance of interest in. The immigration is a really, really important thing in this country, especially with after different attacks going on in our country, and definitely us in our foreign diplomacy. We immigration is a huge thing for us, and Trump won because he was working. He was shouting what the people wanted, and I believe that Biden is trying to shout what progressives want right now, but you can consistently pull up all of his, just all of his policies and all of his, like what he has supported and even things that he said that is just completely contradicting everything he said now. And these are things that are even up until like in 2008, where he was saying that he and President Obama both agreed that they didn't want to redefine, marriage between a man and a woman, and them agreeing on a lot of things during their vice president debate with Sarah Palin. So I think that it's important to note that, like, just because Biden is in the Democratic spot, he was specifically chosen to win the conservative Republican, like, evangelical
100%.
vote
Yeah.
by Obama. And he has a long history of just being a conservative and segregationist praising senator.
Right.
And I think, if at least, if I'm going to be saying he's the cancer, I at least, I need to pull up like the facts, but also I'm not going to be, I'm not saying that he can't change. Because everyone is capable of change, obviously, and growth. I think it's really important that we make him commit to these changes, because he has shown that he doesn't have those previous beliefs, and he didn't believe in certain things in the past, and he stood by those just until recently in the limelight. So we need to make sure he's sticking with those things.
See, and I'm not going to pick apart everything as far as, each issue. I agree, first of all. Now, the marriage equality I want to address, and then I'm going to talk about some other stuff. But that thing, okay, that's the number. My mother was a lesbian. She's gone, so I say was. but she went out for cigarettes and never came. No, she passed. But she was a lesbian, and that was my number one issue for forever. And it still is very important to me. I do want to touch on that, though, that in politics, and we're seeing that electability or viability, whatever the word is, and I hate it, but it's reality in some ways. In 2008, we were in a very different spot as a country as far as marriage equality. And what happened when Obama and Biden got into the White House is that they kind of pushed the Supreme Court. So saying something, you don't want to lie, you want to have integrity, and that's what we hope for. But that one, I actually see the results differently. I think that they said what they needed to say to get elected, and then they did push the progress towards where we need to be. So that's where I would think the people that Biden, and I cannot believe I'm defending him, because if you go back and listen to the podcast, I've nonstop, I've been like, oh my God, he's asleep at the wheel. But the people that he would surround himself with, I do have some hope, sliver of hope. Now, one of the things that came out in the last couple of days is the Unity Task Force. Now, I know that in the past, that has been false hope to get progressive votes. So maybe you can speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a lot like, it's definitely a lot like 2016 Hillary inviting Bernie onto her campaign, and him, speaking 36 times for her just to then be thrown under the bus when she loses the vote. When, I mean, we can get onto the whole actuality of losing the vote and how that plays into also what's going to happen in the 2020 election possibly. But I agree that with the task force, it's a great I saw a great analogy for it, and it was like the Democrats are sitting the progressives at the kids table and are like, you can sit over there and listen to us, but like anything that anyone says. And the thing is that task force has some really big names. Like there are some really big professors that are in for universal tuition, and there's obviously AOC is heading the climate change
with John Kerry.
And continue.
I was going to say, so I agree to the analogy that they're putting the progressives at the kids' table. Well, the Republicans are putting the Democratic Party as a whole out of the conversation. So this is where the meme, to me, has some relevance. I've gotten to a point with Facebook where it's funny because there was so much reaction to that meme. I've gotten pretty selective. I am part of a group. My music, I used to go by the name SelfEsteem BoatWillie. And as anybody listens to the show knows, I've kind of started to go by Patty Rose, which is more me. But I have a Facebook group I started a long time ago called SelfEsteem BoatWillie for President. And that's where I put all my toxic political memes so that I can kind of control who sees it, right?
Yeah.
And so that Joe Biden one, I was like, that's kind of one of the first statements that I've made, even sharing a meme. I know it's silly, but that I've made about Biden in support of him, because there's so many issues with him. I mean, the sexual assault stuff that you can't go without talking about. Do I think he's guilty? Probably. Do I think that the times have changed? And I'm not defending actions in the past.
Oh yeah.
Expectations of who men are? Absolutely. Who you have to be and how you have to be as a young man. What are you, 20, 19, 20?
I am 21. Yeah.
Okay, 21. So you've grown up as a young adult during the Me Too movement, and the way that you treat women is probably much, much more respectful than the people I surrounded myself with as a kid. That being said, I had an ethics because I was raised, like I said, by my mother, that it almost, in some ways, I would take a step back and it missed opportunities as a young adult. I'll be honest, but that's because that's who I was as a person. Now, have I been perfect? Absolutely not. I've got skeletons in my closet, just like everybody. But Joe Biden is a creepo, and the frustration is so strong because all you have to do is see a picture of him smelling someone's hair, and you're like, nope, this guy. You know,
I think it's that blatant disregard to even talk about it on the mainstream media when like SNL, like Adam Sandler's done like his Opera Man skits on Joe Biden sniffing girls, and it's like MSNBC doesn't even talk about it. Like It's like, okay, but can we at least address the skeleton so that it doesn't feel like you're just throwing in this candidate and be like, look, he's saying he's a Democrat, so he's going to do everything you say you want.
Totally. And Bernie Sanders supporters were screaming on the hilltops, including myself, and I'm sure you as well.
Oh yeah.
That we're like, do this during the primary, vet this candidate during the primary, and then we can see that, you know, viable and all that. I mean, there's so many people that are going to be told if they don't support Joe Biden, you know, you're doing wrong. No, I've learned, and I learned a lot from the 2016 election, and I've learned that it's their responsibility to get us. Now, that being said, I'm most likely going to leave the Democratic Party after this election. And because we'll see how it goes. This task force gives me hope for right now. I don't want to be naive and fall for the same playbook that they've been using forever, which is most likely.
Yeah, I really want to see a commitment on that task force, because like if there was an actual, like, you know, because really they're just going to pull up the same policies. Like they're making a task force to really, what it is to specify all of the problems that really Joe Biden's policies need to like fix, and same with like, you know, just in our general what's going on in our country and what we need to do. We already know what we need to do with climate change. We need to support the Green New Deal. We need to switch to completely new renewable energy and, you know, start going towards more of like, you know, if we are funding fossil fuels, it's like within, like, it's only for like 5 years and then it's cut and it's not even subsidized. But like, we know with education that we need to fund like pre-K and before in early childhood services, so that, you know, single parents can have, you know, easier times going to work. But also like we need to fund our colleges as well, because we have just dropped our funding towards both our state universities and private universities.
And now with what's going on with the pandemic, there's going to be a cut to local government, which we'll get to in a little bit, but there's going to be cuts to everything, and it's going to be a nightmare. You know,
all of that needs to be just brought up with like, whatever we identify will commit to changing, but they're just going to identify the things that we've basically just been saying.
Have you watched Planet of the Humans? Did you watch it?
I have not, no.
So one of the things that it talks about, it's really sad. And I'm not saying any documentary, especially right now, we know just because a documentary is made doesn't mean it's gospel. You know, we need to take things with a grain of salt. But there's a lot of really good evidence in it. And I was kind of in and out of napping, I'm not going to lie. So I'm not an expert on the topic, but they showed some of the actual truths behind green energy. And this is backed by Michael Moore, who's very liberal, you know. So it's the, you know, we think that we can get out of the Middle East and get off of fossil fuels. And then if we do lithium type energy, you know, like electric energy, there's destruction to the planet doing that kind of stuff too. And so it's really nerve-wracking, and especially for the youth, and why I wanted to have you on. Now I'm gonna call this episode the Youth Vote Volume 1, because I want to start a series talking to young people that have educated themselves like yourself. You know, I think that people need to see, because they look at, you know, I think I'm a millennial by definition. I think it actually is Zennial, because I'm 1982. I think you're the next generation. I'm
98. Yeah, I think I'm like we're within that like Gen Z millennial area that no one really understands, kind of.
Sure. I mean, yeah, and so I think it's really important that people hear people like yourself that have educated themselves, and actually hear that you have a strong backbone. You have a lot of people behind what you're talking about. You've worked hard. You probably are there's definitely no competition on who knows more about politics, who gives a shit. But you've shown me in the little bit that I've seen of you that you work hard to educate yourself on these things. And today there was a big thing about, you know, what just passed. People aren't even looking at what's passing behind the scenes about how they can basically the FBI can look at your browser history
Yeah.
and all this different shit. And it's constantly going. And so it's really crucial. When I was your age and 18, 19, I hate to be like this, but when I was that age, I was just so apathetic, and the access to knowledge was much different. So the internet wasn't there. So I was just like, oh, George Bush is a fascist. And that was where it ended. You know, and so I've learned more in the last 6 months about politics, I'm not going to lie, that I've ever could have known. And it's because of talking to people like Doyle Canning, James Barber, you know, local people, Albert Lee, people that I'm able to interview on the podcast. So anyway, I wanted to kind of start this dialogue of episodes with youth voters. My niece's partner, Dawson, is somebody that I would like to have on. They are trans, and there's so much, you know, that the youth need to get out, and that people need to listen to them. So this is why I wanted to have you on.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, definitely. No, I definitely agree. And I think that it's really important to get the youth voice out there and make sure that we're heard. I mean, like, Biden is a really touchy subject for me because, like, I'm a bisexual male who has basically just grown up knowing that, like, I remember, you know, being on Tumblr in the early days and seeing all the, like, you know, gay pride, like Biden memes, and thinking that Biden was a really great advocate for it, and knowing that he, like, personally just didn't believe in it, and he still doesn't. But, like, it's, you know, it gets to a point where, like, there was a representative from Planned Parenthood who was just talking about his, like, him as a representative, and being like, we don't really know if it's personal or if it's political, but it's scary that it's hard to not be able to tell.
Yeah, it's tough. That's a tough one, again, coming from a different generation, because, you know, you consider yourself to be an ally, right? Like, I consider myself to be an ally. Now, that being said, what my personal opinion on someone else's orientation is doesn't matter. You know,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I accept it. And I have to admit that I come from a time when it wasn't, like I talked about with 2008, it wasn't accepted. And I grew up in a household where my mom was like, look, I'm gay, and you might not want to tell your friends. You know what I mean? And I'm really proud of you, and proud of the work done by people before you to be so open about it. You know, I talked to Thomas Huda, who's running for mayor of Eugene, and he
Yeah.
was talking about how he's non-binary. And I'm like, what does that mean? And to someone from my age group, I'm not going to lie, it's kind of like, are you going to be doing damage by saying this? Now, I think it's very important that people are comfortable saying that openly. And my point is, his actions have shown that he can look past his personal views to look at what's right. Now, getting the Republican support on this, my strategy on that is focus on the freedom element of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what people's opinion is of someone's sexuality. I care about their opinion. They're fighting for freedom, for them to be able to have rights that everybody should get. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, and exactly what you're saying is why, like, so many, like, progressive, like, really far left, like, I would say, like, democratic socialist candidates are really winning over more Republican and more, like, generally conservative areas, because really when you focus on just the freedoms of things, that's really what a lot of people are afraid of losing. And it's this cognitive dissonance because it's a different thing than what they've been told and what they've been fed. And a lot of people don't know how to educate themselves, and sometimes get education told, like, they grew up being told that they could trust the president, they could trust the government, they could trust media and different things. And now they're just being told they can't trust the media. And so, you know, there's a lot of misinformation. And I think it's important to, like, you know, we can't scold anybody for not knowing. And it's about helping each other, learning, like, through that environment. And that's actually why a lot of, like, progressive candidates do really well, because they're not sitting there being like, oh, you conservatives, and crapping on parts of, you know, I would say, like, you know, Oregon has a hard history. Like, you know, Kate Brown has a history of more, like, I would say, shitting on the rural population of Oregon, and she almost lost the election because of it. Like, Newt Bueller came really close, and he has a terrible history. Like, you can just Google Newt Bueller and you can see how he is just pro-war, and a lot of Democrats ended up voting for him because they were just fed up with Kate Brown. And it's something that a lot of, I think we need to, like, obviously get rid of the two-party system, because
100%.
we're just all people, and we need to believe in candidates, but we also need to understand that our candidates are people, and we can't put in a whole ideology behind them. And our candidates need to understand that they're there for the people. Like, when they stand up, they shouldn't be saying, I'm going to be doing everything right. I know everything right. It's like, I'm going to be doing what you guys tell me to do, and we're going to have experts so we know what we're doing well, because that's how this country can get ran well.
Yeah, populism is really what is effective on either side. And we've done episodes about that as well. You know, Bernie Sanders was a populist candidate talking about progressivism, and then you get Trump as a progressive candidate or a populist candidate talking about basically fascism. And so, yeah, I mean, progress, you can sell it to somebody of any belief. You know, there's libertarians. I had a guy on the podcast, Alan Zundel, who he calls himself a libertarian socialist. And it's hilarious because that is almost an oxymoron, but it's not in today's world, because he's somebody who's a libertarian. He wants as limited government as possible, but he does believe in social safety nets. And when I've had conversations with people that are more conservative, and you talk about safety nets, social safety nets, they're economically smart to make these social safety nets like Medicare for all. We need to stop calling it Medicare for all. It's not a good sell. I think that what we need to call it is freedom insurance. No, I don't know. No,
I think it's something that like people could get behind, because like universal healthcare is, I think, an incredible term for it. And I think that the whole like why Medicare for all is a really popular term is obviously just because we have the pre-written billing for Medicare, and it wouldn't be hard to just be like, instead of the Medicare age being at 60, it's just everyone. Like, it wouldn't, like, people would be like, oh, that's very hard. Like, you know, obviously things going through would be difficult to change, but I think that universal healthcare is a great term for it, because
I agree.
it is universal healthcare. And I think that we should stop thinking of it as the people like paying taxes to take care of another person like they don't want to, and be like, we're all helping each other in case we all get hurt. And the basic question I ask people when I ask them about, you know, universal healthcare, you know, like tuition-free colleges, and, you know, basically things where people are like handouts and free, I'm like, should the government be helping the people, or should the people be helping the government?
Yeah.
Like, we pay taxes. I'm like, imagine just being able to, like, you break your leg and you can go into a hospital. You don't have to worry about any bill. I'm
Just
like,
the element of stress.
Honestly, it's that stress is what also gets a lot of people not going to hospitals when they have like a flu. And we have people dying of preventable diseases every year. Like 68,000 people die a year of not having health insurance and die of preventable diseases. And, you know, millions more die from things that we can, you know, basically prevent, because we are one of the most technologically and scientifically advanced countries in the world, but we put profits over people.
One of the most important issues to young voters, because you went through your high school years during a time when it was a school shooting every couple days.
My senior year was the Umpqua Community College shooting up in Roseburg, Medford? And I'm from Medford. I'm from Central Point. Yeah.
So it's a similar. So that hit home. I mean, it started in 1998. I was a junior. No, it was the beginning of my sophomore year, was the year of the Thurston High School shooting. So it happened in my hometown. At that time, I was a student at Springfield High School. So fast forward 20 years, I'm at my 20-year high school reunion this summer, if it exists, if it happens, if anything happens. But it's just gotten more common thread. And so sometimes when I try to sell that, because obviously you start talking about guns, you're going to lose any conservative. They're like, nope, that's my number one issue. I don't even care. Like, you know, I've had conversations in my barbershop where people have been like, it's collateral damage. I'm like, whoa, dude, don't tell that to a mother. You know, you know what I'm saying? Like, and
I think that that's a completely, like, we have to separate guns and schools like completely, and not be like they can be even allowable near those areas.
So that, you know, when you start talking about where I was going with this is universal healthcare. That's the term we're going to go with. How I believe, I know now they're saying that people don't really like the link between mental health issues and gun violence, but I still in my heart of hearts do believe that there is something to that if you have universal healthcare, that you can at least, it's more realistic that you can be seen if you need to talk to somebody.
Oh, you know? And yeah, people completely like think of universal healthcare as only being hospitals, but they completely, that is like, you know, a single mother maybe a I don't know, a 20-year-old college student going to the gynecologist because they don't have insurance and they aren't able to pay for anything, but something has happened, or, you know, being able to go to the dentist, optometrist, you know, a physical therapist. Like, so many things are implemented into universal healthcare that people don't they don't take into account, and they also then don't take in themselves to account, because they wouldn't think that it applies to them when, you know, they're like, I'd be paying more in taxes, but you're also cutting your medical expenses every single month, and you don't have to have the stress of going through an
Exactly.
insurance company. Like, your bill might be $130 max for, like, you know, having to pay for, you know, a bed.
I mean, what is the promise of America? It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Exactly.
So how can we, I mean, I believe so strongly that the pursuit of happiness is a lot easier when you actually have flexibility
Mhm.
financially. How are you supposed to do that when you can be bankrupted by a sinus infection?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And so we've gone on the record on this podcast so many times about healthcare for all is usually what I would call it. You know, healthcare for all, but universal healthcare, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it. Universal healthcare, and don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure that that started, Hillary Clinton was the one that started pushing that. And there has been a 35-year assault on Hillary Clinton by the Republican talk radio, by people like Rush Limbaugh. And I've grown up when I was about 14, 15 years old, where my dad was like, can you believe this woman? And that was the first time a first lady had ever been attacked like that.
Hmm.
And I'm not a fan of Hillary Clinton, but it's crazy the amount of work that went in to, you know, to saying how terrible is, how she
And
is.
it's weird to think that, like, so like universal healthcare, I remember Hillary Clinton also talking about where was Bernie Sanders when she was talking about fighting for, you know, universal healthcare for a lot of people, and he was actually right behind her while she was giving a speech
Yeah.
back in the 1980s.
Yeah.
But it's really important to talk about, like, you know, Hillary Clinton did push the healthcare for all, and that was really important. But um, and, like, you know, the thing that is important right now is that Biden specifically has said that he will veto it if it comes to him. And Trump has even touted saying that he would put Medicare for all, or some type of Medicare for all insurance to everybody because of the pandemic. And it is like like the Hill has a statistics just taken this April 2020, where it was like 69% of, like, all registered voters, Republicans, independents, and Democrats, all support a Medicare for all for Americans. Now,
Right.
it didn't specify for, like, you know, if it was Americans and citizens. I'm assuming probably just for citizens, but that's still something that is really important to talk about. Like, back from 2018, it's only dropped 1% among, like, Republicans, and that's really, really important. Like, we have been making great strides to making the understanding of universal healthcare be more of a realistic thing instead of just this, like, pie in the sky dream. And I think that Biden saying those things and adamantly saying that he would veto it and that it doesn't make sense, and when people bring it up to him, he tells them to go vote for the other guy. um, I think that it's really, really, it sets back you know, the massive strides we've been making, because he just comes along, and because he was put in Obama's administration and because he was the vice president, he's just a shoe-in now to be the candidate. And it's really funny when they talk about him being great with the African American vote in the community, when he's notoriously, like, since the 70s has fought, like, he says pre-segregationist, he has fought against
Mm-hmm.
busing. He's called it literally, like, he has called, like, the war that he wanted to keep on drugs, that they should go at it the same way they went at the Vietnam War. He's like one of the most incremental people for creating mandatory minimums, the three strike policies, and, like, just completely affecting like, minorities and people of color in those communities. And when all of this just basically went out of people's brains when he said that he might have Kamala Harris as his VP. And it's
Right.
really, like, I don't know if you've seen it, but on Facebook, I see a lot of advertisements talking about, like, they tout a Kamala Harris or a Stacey Abrams VP picture, or Elizabeth Warren, one of those three. And that's mainly the Joe Biden ad, looking for, like, trying to get a lot of more progressive votes. But
Because they're considering them. We'll see how
oh
they
yeah,
actually go. I mean, I think he's probably gonna he's I think he's gonna pick an African American woman. He said he's going to, and I think he will, because now if he doesn't, he's gonna, you know.
well, he said he'll pick a woman, and then they asked if he would specify if it would be an African American woman, and he never specified later. but I believe he's touted Governor Whitmore from
Michigan.
Michigan,
Yeah.
and I think that will most likely be his pick. That or Klobuchar. I was really thinking that Hillary Clinton might try and swoop in on this, and depending on how Biden acts between now and November, like if Hillary were to try and swoop in and either snag the VP spot or just Biden drop out and after Hillary being his VP and then taking his presidential spot. I don't know. There's a lot of different things that could possibly go on, but I definitely think that it's probably going to be Whitmore or Klobuchar.
Yeah, Whitmore's pretty impressive so far, just at least her speaking and whatnot.
Yeah, she is very anti-Trump, which is good, and she is a very she is a smart woman and I think she has some good policy choices. I think the only problem is that they are repeating the same. It doesn't really matter who Biden's cabinet is, because we have the two big problems of that were in the 2016 election as well are going to show in the 2020 election, and that's going to be Hillary was set to win by 91%. Polls had her sweeping everyone, and she was in a better shape than Biden was at this point. And she also has she is a lot better in her dictation and her speech, and she has a lot better policies than Biden has even now in his 2020 campaign. And then you're also facing the fact so that Biden isn't as strong as Hillary, but also Hillary won by 3 million votes last in 2016. And so even if Biden were to win by 3 million, we still have the electoral college that is going to just completely outweigh our votes. And the Democrats used that in the primaries to squash Bernie Sanders. But the thing is, the more they tout up their own voter suppression, the more that the Republicans on the other side are going to be able to use that voter suppression against them. And the Democrats really don't care if they do, because as Joe Biden said, nothing's going to fundamentally change. If when Hillary Clinton lost, she just disappeared into the backstage, and she was able to just keep living her life. And then she came back a year later and started posting a lot of stuff on Twitter.
Started going on Howard Stern and talking shit on Bernie Sanders.
And then people are just thinking that I'm imagining. Yeah.
I think that she is a better speaker maybe than Joe Biden, but I think that she's much more hated than Joe Biden.
Yes.
I think Joe Biden has a better chance in Michigan, especially if he picks Whitmore. I think he has a better chance in Wisconsin. I don't know. It's really frustrating because, I've lost friends over the way that they've addressed the allegations against him, because they make these comments like, come on, we can't, I don't know. It's just really frustrating. People don't take that stuff serious. So I want to move on.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. No, you're completely right.
I want to move on from Biden. I think, well, let me ask you before we do, if the vote was tomorrow, what would you do?
So I believe that I would 100%. I think that I have had a lot of conversations, people talking about how voting a third party is completely a moot point and that you're throwing your vote away. And I don't believe that is, because you're voting, you're having your voice heard. And then I always be like, 46% of Americans voted in the 2016 election. I'm still voting, and I'm voting down ballot too. I did cast my ballot for Bernie Sanders, and in the 2016, in the election, if it was tomorrow, I would probably end up, debating between, there are a few Green Party candidates that are still going through, and I might write in if one of those candidates, if that is a possibility.
Again, I don't. Calling it a wasted vote, I don't agree. In Oregon, we already talked about that.
Yeah, well, especially because of the electoral college, though.
Right.
And going on a wasted vote.
It's not. But going on Facebook and talking about it, if places like Michigan and Wisconsin where it can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
It's like you don't want to motivate the wrong people kind of thing. And then I also think the Russian influence too, where it's like they're gonna prey. They're so good at preying on our weaknesses. I'm convinced that I was someone that was convinced by some of the memes that were being shared because they use Bernie Sanders' kind of message against his own supporters. I don't know.
They were really, well, that was the thing, is that Trump, he admitted that when Bernie Sanders dropped out, when Bernie dropped out, Bernie had so many great policies, and that's why the people liked him. There's audio recordings of him being like, we need to copy things from his playbook. And he did. He essentially won over the independence that he needed to,
Yes. Yeah.
because he was able to just, and I would say he, he said a lot of trigger words, which is really important with a lot of, I would say, the active voter scene, which is a lot older in our country. Trigger words are really important for them, and hearing the things that, like, the actual policy names that they hear so much. But I think, like, truly they're going to repeat the same thing, because although Biden is not as hated as Hillary, he has so much room. I mean, we're just ignoring the fact that Hunter Biden was just in 2019.
Oh,
And how, like,
that won't be ignored here coming
oh
soon.
no, and that's going to probably be one of the biggest things that will probably lose him in the election. I mean, there was like a time in the Obama Biden administration where they both approved a $1.3 billion construction contract for Biden's brother, who had never done residential contracting before. And
Right.
there is a long history of Biden being really fishy with economic things and bailing out companies. I mean, he helped bail out MBNA, who was the credit card company, and they're his second biggest donor. And they were one of the biggest people that led to the 2008 crashes and so many people losing thousands of dollars. So
Where do you get most of
stings.
your information? I'm asking more or less
Yeah,
because I think it's important for everyone, but for young people, it's obvious that you've done your research.
definitely.
Where do you turn for information?
So, I mean, really what I love about doing history checks on politics is really you just have to pull up, like I know it's like sounds dumb, but you just pull up the Wikipedia page of what the
Yeah.
acts are, and you can just see what the act says, the bill writing. And, like, luckily I have spent a lot of time reading political jargon, so I just read things really quickly and I understand them. But you can just look up those acts and laws, and then you can find those like either the Senate Judiciary Committee like hearings, or any different things. Like I have a lot of different Biden's videos from like the 80s where he talks about cutting Social Security, cutting Medicaid. That's one of the things he talked about on the Senate floor. So I get a lot of my sources from like primary videos, but also just looking up the bills and acts and seeing who
Just
voted for them and against them. And that just, like, that's you write their track record. I talk to a lot of people. I am active on the Twitter sphere, and I do talk to a lot of people, and I cross-reference my my sources, and I like to make sure that I go through different, like, if I'm going through like articles, mainly going through like articles and journals to see how the general populace is feeling about that certain action, so that I can take that into account when I'm thinking about how that person voted on a certain law or a bill. And it's really easy to just see, like, because I mean they transcribe everything and put them on there, so you can just see flat out what the
right.
senators and things have said. Like, I have one of my biggest problems with Joe Biden, and one is the fact that he's touted as being a hero for the African American community, when he's probably one of the biggest problems that America's ever had. And I mean, he was the reason why, like, he was notoriously said that he was like he's praised segregationists, but I mean, he once said he's like, if you have a quarter size gram of crack cocaine, Senator Thurmond, who is a
Yeah, yeah.
notorious segregationist, he's
He's
like,
in the
and
Klan. Yeah.
we wrote a bill so that if you have to go away for 5 years immediately, judge can't say a thing, no probation. And then he's like, and just like literally 2 minutes later, after talking a little bit more, he's like, we made sure that in that bill they pushed in civil forfeiture and property forfeiture for drug crimes, which wasn't a thing before. And it's
So
incredible when I talk to people about drug things. Like, there is no mandatory minimum for rape. There's no mandatory minimum for homicide or for murder or for kidnapping, for child molestation, for sex trafficking, nothing.
yeah,
Only
for drugs.
for drugs.
And it's because that's the way that they can
And it's
attack
because
minorities.
of Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And it's because
Yeah.
of Joe Biden that millions of people are in billions of dollars of debt, because he single-handedly wrote the bill that made Chapter 7 bankruptcy so impossible to file for, and literally made bankruptcy with student loans impossible. He
Yeah. Well,
single-handedly wrote that.
see, I think part of there's this weird reality television politics world we live in where I know a lot of Democrats that are kind of queasy about Biden are like, can't he just drop out and have Cuomo or whoever the new
Honestly, so many people are like saying that, and it's hard because it's then like, what is our democracy? And
Oh
obviously the
yeah,
DNC before argued in the Supreme Court and won, being like, we're a private organization. We could grab a homeless person off the street and elect them as our
right,
nominee, and it would be completely legal. And the
right.
Supreme Court's like, yep,
Yeah. So now that being said, let's focus more on local stuff because I
yeah,
think that's where everything is really important. One thing I want to touch on, the flyer that I'm using for this, I chose the picture that you had with Jeff Merkley.
hmm
So what was meeting him like? I do think
oh my gosh, I have always like I've joked around with all of my friends, but I like to say like Jeff Merkley's like my grandpa. I asked him like just about his immigrant, like it was the time that I met him was actually right after he raided the with like 5 lures, he raided the ICE
the
detention
camps.
center.
Yeah.
And like as a Mexican American, I'm a first generation, my father's from Cotija, and like my I have family that has been detained, and like my friend's family's been detained. It's incredibly like heroic to have a person literally be like, I'm not going to step away, like you have to let me in. I'm a federal employee and I have lawyers here, I have warrants, you have to let me in. And he was not taking no for an answer, and he recorded and showed that we have children sleeping on the ground with aluminum foil blankets. And I remember everyone trying to justify it being like, well, they were military reflective blankets. And they're like, no, they tested them. It was like aluminum foil sheet wrap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and like they were drinking out of toilets. And then they were like, but these toilets were sanitized. And I was just like,
That, yeah, yeah.
oh,
And then it's
okay.
funny because the knock on Merkley, a lot of times people would be like, he's just doing that at political. I'm like, well, good,
Dude, if
good,
that's
because that's what we,
political, then he is doing the right thing, because then he's doing it for the people and the
it's
people want that.
humanitarian. Exactly.
Honestly.
It's like he's doing this as for political gain. I'm like, good. That's what we want them to
And
be
I feel like
doing.
Jeff Merkley is probably, I would say, one of the least controversial representatives that Oregon has.
Sure. I think the
Like,
two senators that we have, in my opinion, are pretty awesome in different ways. And I think that though he was getting out of Oregon on that one, from in my experience, from what I've seen, Wyden does the stuff in Washington and Merkley focuses on the stuff in Oregon a lot. Now he's done things where he's reached out, like you said, on the border, whatever.
mhm.
But
And I
yeah,
think that was important to maintain our sanctuary state status, because that was up for election in that year, in the 2018 year, which was when Kate Brown was running as well, because that was a huge thing that Newt Bueller was going to knock down. And that was what he was making a huge like focal point, was that we have our sanctuary, showing what our ICE detainment centers would be and what ICE has been, I think
right.
is a really important thing, because that was on the board. And then a lot of people, I mean, my parents in particular, they ended up not voting for Newt Bueller and not voting for that because of the videos that leaked, and of the actual precedent that sent for like what a sanctuary status actually meant for a state and
What
what
it can
ICE
do.
has
Yeah.
been doing.
Yeah, one thing about Kate Brown on a different note, it makes me laugh every time I see somebody say like we need to vote her out. I'm like, you do realize that she's going to be done after this. Her time is up after this. People don't know anything about anything.
Yeah,
That's
they
why I
don't
wanted
understand the term limit things.
no, and that's why I wanted to have you on, is because you're a young adult, 21 years old, and you've obviously educated yourself, and it's really cool because you've done your research. Now you do have some political aspirations long term. Is that true?
Yes, I am. I am possibly already like thinking of a 2022 like office run, possibly for Oregon's #2 seat down in like for like the 2/3 of the state that seat is.
So for
Um,
city, what would that be for Congress
that would
or
be
for?
for, yeah, representative for Congress.
Oh my gosh, do it! And when you do get
Um,
back on this show, I will
I
absolutely have you on.
definitely will. But if that's not in there, then I definitely will be running, I mean, for a local office down, because I am moving down to Ashland
Yeah,
and Medford's area. So definitely you'll see me in local office in 2022. But I'm already starting off talking to a lot of different people, like Doyle Canning and a lot of
yeah.
different representatives like Joshua Collins. I know there's stuff going on, but
Doyle
I've been
Canning.
talking to a lot of them.
Doyle Canning is great, and I think for anybody watching this, that we're getting to the end. You need to cast your votes, and I think at this point you want to drop it into like an actual box instead of
Yeah,
dropping
I
it
think
into
it's one of
mail.
the easiest things that we have. I mean, drop in mail-in ballot voting. Also, if you're watching this out of state and you don't have mail-in voting and you want to,
Call
you should
your
contact
representatives.
your
Yeah,
state representative and be like,
yeah,
we should just have mail-in voting so I can stay in my car like a drive-through
sure.
McDonald's like
Yeah,
Medford does and just drop in your
there's
voter ballot.
there's a lot of talk right now, and I tend to kind of have a comedic spin on a lot of political stuff to keep my sanity. But there's a lot of talk right now. People are asking me like, okay, Bernie's on the ballot. Is it okay to vote for him? I'm like, absolutely, in the primary,
yeah.
because of the delegates and how he can have influence over the policy proposals. And I don't know how much that'll do, but anyways, there is influence there. But it was funny because this guy was like, I voted for Bernie. And I'm like, I voted for him twice, once in person and 4 times in the mail. It was like, no, but I mean, it's so ridiculous. There's no evidence to support that there's any.
Yeah, I mean, the FBI literally came out, and I think it was like 2019 or 2018, and was like, yeah, there was no like voter irregularities in the 2016 election. There was actually we didn't have enough people voting.
Exactly, because the will of the people. I mean, just use your common sense. How is waiting in line for 5 hours to vote, to pull a little lever, and maybe you get 3 bars across to win some money? No, but how is that more effective than just sitting on your kitchen table and writing it out and doing it? And I actually like the ballot process because you can make it a collective experience where you can have other people discussing and looking at the voter pamphlet and pulling up your, like you said, Wikipedia. I mean, you can literally find anything you need on the internet. You can really get a gut feeling about a lot of candidates from their Facebook page. Now, be careful with that because people know how to present themselves when it's not really.
But it gives you time to at least, like, you could pull up, like, in the world we have, you can pull up everything about that candidate in 10 minutes and, like, basically know their whole platform if you really wanted to before you cast your ballot, which is really, I think, an incredible time for our democracy. And it's hard that that's under attack. And we need to make sure that we're, like, going against that because weirdly our federal government doesn't want, mail-in voting. And that's the thing that they're trying to get rid of. But, we need to make sure that we're actively being vocal in our democracy so that it's our democracy.
100%. So Dakota Licea?
Licea.
Yeah. So
no problem.
It's really cool to meet you. And I mean, this is awesome because, it started with a meme and I think it's really important for people to at least reach out to each other and just hear each other out. I mean, we're probably haven't changed anything from where we started. I'm sure that you'll probably not vote for Biden.
Honestly, that's still something. If he is committing to change, that's still the thing, is that even with all the policy changes and everything, we still have Tara Reid to go through because there's a lot of things on like Twitter that are trying to disprove it. But I mean, with the Larry King video surfacing and then the 1996 court case of her husband, stating in court the sexual assault allegation, during her work in Biden's administration, there are a lot of things that are corroborating evidence that at least we should hear it out and talk about it. And what's damning to the Democrats is that they're not. And if you literally just pull up Google, it's going to give you at least out of the 5 random articles you'll be given, 2 or 3 of them are going to be right-wing things being Democrats double standard with Tara Reid. And it's really, really burning them. And so they're trying to talk about her in a bad light to, come off as if they're basically trying to Anita Hill her, even though they were completely supportive of Christine Blasey Ford and she had less evidence, but it was, corroborative evidence. And we need to believe women when they come forward and hear them out, at least give them a chance to speak.
And hearing them out is what we need to do with the youth. And that's why I wanted to have you on, because you talked about the kids table. One of the worst feelings that you can have is being not included in the conversation. And so when people look at someone, it's like, oh, you're naive, you're wet behind the ears, you think you're such an optimist, and they just cast off what you have to say, then you're like, fine, I'll do it myself, and I'm stronger than you, and I've got all these people behind me. And I think people are afraid of what the youth can possibly do. Because when I was a kid, we were punk rock kids, so we were busy drinking ourselves stupid. There's so many young people today that are like, I can't do drugs and I can't get drunk because my whole life is out there online. And it's good to see. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but we were party animals. We would do you guys shame. No, but it was a different time. And so I think that there's more opportunity for different types of people, for people that are motivated as young adults. And I have a lot of optimism for the future. So I do hope you get into office, and I hope you push for that. And so now we're friends on Facebook over arguing on a meme, which is hilarious.
I think it's a great way to start a friendship.
Yeah. Thanks again for doing this.
I'm going to end me on.
Yeah, man. I'm going to end this with a song. And I chose this song because It's called Our Enemy Is Us, and it's about how we defeat ourselves. And it's really about the Democratic Party, but it's about the country as a whole. And so this is one of my old tracks under the name SelfEsteem BoatWillie. Our Enemy Is Us. Dakota, say your last name again. Dakota
Licea.
Licea. Okay. I don't know why I just can't do it, dude.
It's good. No problem.
This is really cool. Thanks again for doing this. So
Thanks
this
for
is
having me
me.
on.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot. So this is me, SelfEsteem BoatWillie, with Our Enemy Is Us.
If there's anyone out there who thinks we're confused about who our enemies are,
our enemy is us, a society is busted. Gone are the days when a friend can be trusted. Allies are few, far and in between. Right in our face, not behind the scenes. Media is bidding our souls dry, feeding us read as the polls lie. Don't think I'm prepared for this. I've constantly been scared of this divisiveness, the righteousness of prideful bliss. I write to this, I cry to this, try to forgive, try to find reasons to live. Our enemy is us, a society is wounded. Misinformation, celebrate as spoon-fed nonsense. Conscience attacks itself. Everywhere the gap in wealth, the middle class is MIA. Caste system is here to stay. Ignore the poor every day, yet with blind faith we say we pray. Led astray by evil leaders. Over here I found some leaders. Treat them with a broken system. If they die, sorry, we missed them.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Our enemy is us, and it starts from the top. Revolution comes from the bottom up. Love your neighbors without borders. Don't just blindly follow orders. Speak out against what makes you queasy. No one said that life was easy. Defeated is a state of mind. Depleted is this state of mind. Speak out against what makes you queasy. No one said that life was easy. Defeated is a state of mind. Depleted